Fridman. Now, I'm not sure whether many of you know Paul Fridman. You probably do if you've been in the development game for a while, but we're delighted to be joined by Paul. He's the founder and director of Fridcorp. So, since starting Fridcorp in 1997 at the ripe young age of 20, Paul, along with his business partner Nigel Gavoni, has built one of Australia's most respected and awarded property development businesses. If you were here yesterday for Tim's presentation, Tim Gurner's conversation, grab a seat. How are you?
Good, you? I'm
Good.
not sure if I'm mic'd up or not.
You would have remembered that Tim actually referred to Paul as very much a mentor and a pioneer of the design-led development sort of trend that we've seen in Australia. Your business is inspired by the intersection of art and architecture. You've built a $1.5 billion development portfolio. Those numbers may be not quite up to date, but with a pipeline of about 1,700 apartments in the Australian marketplace. You've got projects all across the eastern seaboard, and Fridcorp is now one of Australia's most undoubted premier design-led developers. Would you please welcome Paul?
I'm not sure if my mic's turned on. It's not turned on.
Can we get the mic turned on, please?
All good?
We're good?
Yep. It's bright.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
You good?
Yeah, it's much more relaxing atmosphere this time.
Now, do we have a clicker somewhere? Perfect. Now,
Can I just say that I'm really happy you've got me talking after a Green council member and bagging developers and greedy developers. So I just want to say I am one.
we appreciate that admission. This is an honest conversation. Paul, what were you like as a kid, mate?
If you'd ask my mother, she'd say a real pain in the ass. I was a kid that suffered ADD, that didn't sit still very long. Was terrible at school. I was dyslexic, and so much so that they actually put me in ESL, English as a second language, with kids that just came into the country. They didn't know how to deal with me. So it was very difficult, I think, for my parents at certain stages, but I was fortunate that I had sport, and that helped me a lot, give me confidence. And I think at one stage my father said to me, just quit school because you're just no good at school. But I did finish school. I didn't finish my tertiary education because I went on and started Friedcorp at 21.
21,
Yeah,
I got that wrong.
You know, I'm only 25 now, so.
So what were you doing? How did you get into what you were doing?
I always had a fascination with property. I still remember today when I was young, going with Dad to auctions. I just used to love going to house auctions and so on. So I was always fascinated with property. I love it when we put this slide up. I was 20, I think I was 20 there, young, good looking and a little bit skinnier. So I was fascinated with property, loved it, and when I kind of didn't want to go back to university after I took a year off, my mother said to me, just do something you love. And I said, well, I've got this thing about property. I went and did the real estate sub-agents course. I became a property manager, earning $271 a week. That was really good back then. And I had this fascination with property and still do. And I say this, I'm very fortunate that I found at an early age something I love doing. And 20 years later, here I am.
So you got into property management. You then identified the fact that you probably wanted to do something more creative. Talk us through getting started and your first kind of deals. How did you put those things together? How did you get going as Fridcorp?
Yeah, look, I say I came from a family with that gave me a lot of love. Unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of money. So I didn't just buy property and I was a mogul already at 21. It was really running around and putting options on sites. So I paid $10,000, I sold my car, I put the $10,000 I got for my car, I put an option on a property. I then cut in the architects, the land surveys into a land subdivision because we couldn't do the actual construction. We didn't have enough funding. And that kind of was the first deal. I was able to buy a new car after that, thankfully. And for me, it was, people say to be a developer, you've got to take a lot of risks. I think risk is innate, and I think if if you don't think about it, you don't really have risk. And if you love what you do, well, you'll just do it. So people say at 21, you went and bought a site and put $10,000 down, probably the only 10 grand I had. How could you just do that? I don't know. I just did. And I think to this day, whilst now Fridcorp's $1 or $2 billion in development pipeline, again, I don't often stop to think about it, and I don't often want to even say those numbers. It's like the Austin Powers one,
Yeah,
$2
yeah.
billion. So for me as a developer, I just do what I do and what feels right to me.
And so you went and approached people with money
Yep.
at the start. Just talk us through
Yeah.
who you approached, how you put the deal together. I think we've got one here, which is Tennyson Street in Elwood.
In Elwood, in Melbourne,
Yeah.
the old squash courts.
Tell us about that.
Well, when I did buy that site, the first site that I put $10,000 option, I was fortunate enough, in a sense, to beat out Tony Gandel from the Gandel family. And he looked at what I did and then came to me and said, I really like what you did with no money. What happens if you've got some money? And so we probably did 10 years, quite a few dozen of 10 to 15 unit type deals, or over 6-7 years. And so the Gandel family were my first backers, and I was fortunate because I didn't have any money, and the beauty about them is I didn't have to use a bank. So for my first 5 or 6 years, I didn't use a bank, which was good and bad.
So, I mean, the Gandels are, for those that don't know, one of the wealthiest families in Australia and serious hitters. What did they teach you about getting started and controlling?
Is that counsellor still here? Because I just want to be careful about what they taught me with him in the room. What did they teach me? They taught me about internal rate of returns, really, about investing equity, what its risk profile should be, the seed capital at the start of development, when that should go in, and the type of return you should expect. And obviously today it's become more sophisticated in the way we structure funding for development in mezzanine, pref-ec, and all sorts of things these days. But it's about risk versus return, I guess.
Yeah. And did you obviously would have made mistakes along the way. Tell us
Still
about...
do.
You still do?
Still
Tell us
do.
about some of the things you learnt by making mistakes, and maybe an example
Look,
or
I
two.
think I was very hands-on, and some would say I'm still very hands-on, but I think every mistake you make is better than any success you have. So I made several mistakes. I don't think I put a build contract together for my first 3 or 4 developments. I trusted builders. I trusted people. So probably trusting builders could be a mistake in the early days. Not saying all builders are bad, but managing risk. In development, there's so many elements of risk along the way, and I say that we're in the business, I'm a fireman really, just putting out fires all day long. So it's mitigating risk and managing that through the process.
And so when you find a site, how do you approach it? How do you conceive it? Do you know what you want at the very, very start? Or does that happen as an evolution through the journey?
I think for me, development is the art of storytelling. I often say to my staff and others, I'm kind of like Willy Wonka. I get to tell the story in my own fairyland. So when I buy a site initially, I've already got an idea, a vision of how I want it to look. It's funny when you're putting some of these things up, these are 10, 15 years old, these developments. So we're really proud of some of the stuff that it doesn't age that badly, and it's about being true to our vision. So when we buy a site, the marketing, the design, the real core integrity of a development must be to the nth degree delivered. And I think that people say, did you always have a brand? Did you always want to have a brand? No, we always wanted to make sure what we did was the best we could do. So, for me, it's really telling a story without leaving a page or a chapter out. So people really buy in for the whole experience. And that's what I love. I love the art of the storytelling of a development. And if you're not very clear and strong in your vision, the development inevitably has problems.
Gets diluted. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, you don't come from a construction discipline or an architecture discipline or a finance discipline. You are the storyteller.
Yeah.
How have you been able to put together the team around you to be able to make sure that you're building it right and you're designing it right and you're funding it right?
Well, it's interesting when you've got these developments up. I remember this development you've got on screen now. That was the first development I did that had a lift in it, and I was so excited because I had two goals in life, and that was to do a development that had a lift, and I rode that lift many times, and then to have a crane with my name on it. Little things, and that's really some of my goals. But when we got to this one and we did a lift, and we did two of these buildings at the one time, this one and the one previously, we had the wrong team. And it was a really, really tough call because that was our first sort of 6 years as a true development company. And we basically had to sack everyone in the team. We sacked all our staff at the time, and we rebuilt. We went and headhunted a lot out of Mirvac. And that was 10 years ago. Because we felt to make the jump. So the biggest development I'd done to that stage was 18 apartments. And I found that I was doing 6 or 7 developments at one time and nothing greater than 18. So I found that I was inefficient with what we were doing because the development is the same marketing, it's the same selling management and all sales management, construction management. So we wanted to take the step to become bigger, to be more efficient. So do less and make it larger. So to do that, I needed a new infrastructure. So I went and headhunted, and I can hand on my heart say all the guys that we headhunted then are still with me today. 3 of them are directors now of the business. Most of they don't let me do anything today, basically. They like a smooth process, so I'm not allowed to do any feasibilities, that's for sure. Back of the envelope stuff, that went out apparently in the 90s, and not that I was around the 90s, but I was. My team have real autonomy and real. I say I'm really fortunate because when you believe in something and then others believe in it, it gets easier. And I've got a great team of people who believe in Fridcorp and the brand and what we're doing. And I appreciate Gurner yesterday. He sent me a text saying, "I pumped you up, buddy, as always." Really, all he's done is made me feel old. But I'm really proud of what Tim's done in the sense, I like to say I didn't mentor him because he's a bull unto himself. But he's the same. He's built a good team. I went in and had a look at his team, and he needed to beef up his team, and he's done a great job in that. So it's really, I think to be a really successful developer, it's great. I can have vision, and I always say when it's a good development, I stand up there and I get a lot of the kudos. But it's really about building great people around you that buy in to the brand and what we're trying to achieve.
It's the ultimate team sport, isn't it? I mean, really, it sounds cliche, but it truly is a team sport.
There's no way we're building over 1,000 or 1,500 apartments at the moment. There's no way I can do it. In actual fact, I don't think I could do a little development on my own anymore because I'm so used to the guys doing what they do that I'm a little bit out of touch in a sense, which is good and bad. But like I say, you need great people around you. I like to think that I'm the dumbest person in my office. Not that difficult. So it's really the guys in the office. We've got a fantastic team.
Now, Paul, interestingly, you're obsessed with the built outcome being better than the render. Talk us through that obsession, and we've got a couple of examples here which I can talk through.
I think
it's just a feel for the branding.
So just going back a step, so really when we changed the team about 9 or 10 years ago, we jumped from 18 apartments, then we did 70 units, and from 70 we did this development, Elm, which is 300 apartments. So we made a really big jump, and back then it was a really stock standard type high-rise. 10 years ago, it was really just minimal basic rubbish that was being delivered in high-rise development. I'm not too sure about Brisbane, but definitely Melbourne and Sydney. it was really just crap being delivered to the market, mainly through one or two high-rise developers. So I wanted to deliver a quality, still a boutique project that, whilst it's 300 apartments, but it's still, every individual apartment has its own really sense of place. And I'm obsessed with delivering beyond expectations. And I think and I tell the team, whilst we're selling 300 apartments in a building and we're selling, 1,000, 1,500 units, every individual apartment that's sold to a purchaser, that's generally the only purchase they're going to make in their life, one or two. So we have to respect that. And we're selling the dream because they don't get to see and touch generally, because of finance and structure. We're selling off the plan. So my thing is respecting our purchaser. We have 32% of every building being, as an average, being resold to second-time purchasers, which and then some, which we're really proud of, because we believe in what we're doing and we're really committed. I spent an extra $1 million. We sold this project out and I spent an extra $1 million in the lobby when I didn't have to, because I really want people to feel a sense of pride when they walk into their apartment buildings. And it's so few developers I found up until then, the game's lifted enormously since, delivered on the expectations. We've got in our office a few of the marketing renders and the actual from other developers of things we never want to be. And I won't say which developers, by the way. So for me, it's really about delivering. Our delivery must be better than the render, and we always want the purchaser to feel like, wow. I don't want them, if I ever heard one of my purchasers walk in saying, this is crap, or this wasn't what I thought, I think I'd die. And more often than not, I'm circling around the building on the inspection days, because I do want to
freaking out. I mean, it's a simple but very powerful obsession, because it really stands for something when you can very simply identify that we want the finished product to be better than the expectation and what we've promised. I mean, talk us through your branding, because this is something that's really interesting. I mean, we've had workshops over the last day about project marketing and building brand and creating a sense of excitement. I mean, how do you go about building something like Elm, for example?
Yeah, well, again, this was the big step for us, where we'd done a 70-unit development, then we jumped to a 300. And again, it's about the storytelling. And I remember when I launched Elm, and we had this redhead girl with the green background, and most of the other developers, especially back then, high-rise developers, they were 50, 60 plus, would say to me, excuse my French, but they'd say, what the fuck? And so we end up calling our branding WTF. Because when they ask me what it is, I feel like we're making people think about it. So when we launch a project, we go through the WTF stage for the first 4 weeks, then we go into our ROI stage, and then we go into on-market stage. So for us, the WTF has become quite important in our office. People say it's just my way of being able to swear without paying the dollar in my kid's jar. But it's the storytelling. And it's those 3 stages of selling into then the construction stage and the delivery stage. It's the art of storytelling. And my marketing, we're very hands-on with that. Again, it's got to make people think. To sell one apartment, I need 100 people to have noticed it. I need 10 people to have looked at it, and then I sell one apartment. So when we're doing a development in Sydney that's 600 apartments. I need a lot of people to notice.
Yeah.
So your marketing has got to be cut through. Again, I look at the last 5-7 years, the marketing and development has really stepped up. I remember, 7 years ago when I launched a project and called it Elm, most developments, I think that was 10 years ago, most developments didn't have its own brand, its own name. Now today, you wouldn't do a development without having your own website, your own, it's got its place. So marketing's become critical.
So do you pick the name?
Do I pick the name? Well, if you have a look at our early projects, Ivy, Elm, Lily, it was quite botanical. It had this softness about it.
Yeah.
do I pick the name? The name doesn't get selected until I'm satisfied,
Yeah.
but I don't always come up with it.
Your Instagram account is actually one of the best things that I follow.
Great.
Genuinely,
Thanks.
it's weird. It's different. There is stuff from all over the world, and what I consistently feel as I go and observe it is that it's kind of like you're playing on the peripheral,
Yeah.
but at the center of it is what's uniquely you. And I don't know whether you run that account or someone else runs it, but it's very interesting. And
I would like to say that I'm sitting at my computer every day doing that, but
it's interesting to see where the inspirations come from.
Again, we say it's a bit of storytelling. Occasionally, it goes a bit skew, which I don't like.
Which is cool, though. I mean, I find that interesting.
So I approve for the month the imagery.
Yep.
Because I want people to be inspired by design. I am heavily inspired by design. My wife's a designer, and I really believe in building buildings inside out. We live inside a building, we don't live on the outside of a building. So whilst one of my closest friends, Callum Fraser, would probably disagree with me, I truly feel that we build buildings inside out. So the art of design and the detail of design. So I love furniture design. Like, I'm obsessed by furniture design because I think that's real creativity. And so I'm inspired by things, and I want to kind of take people on that journey to be inspired.
For the architects in the room, I mean, from your perspective, what could architects do better in the design process?
Jeez,
Go easy.
That's really putting me on the spot. Can I just see which architects are in the room? Look, I think we've got incredible architects in this country. I'm very fortunate that I've worked with a huge amount of Ellenberg Fraser, Bates Smart, DKO, recent ones we've worked with. So I think they're fantastic. I think, and going back to the previous speaker, planning sometimes kind of hinders an architect to be free and creative. And I always say to our architects as a brief, give me what you can do best. Don't worry about planning, don't worry about costs, everything else will pull into line. But feel free flowing to really be creative. I think the worst thing you can do is stop a creative person being creative and give them too many boundaries. Try and put me in a box, it just doesn't happen. And so I think planning itself probably is problematic for an architect. And I think sometimes, and I hate to say this, but I do say it, that sometimes an architect's only as good as their brief. And so I think it's about letting the architects do what they do, let the interior designers do what they do, and then just kind of bringing it together. So what could they do better? I think some architects get too caught up with how the building looks, and so problems occur that are not practical for the people living in them at times. So I think architects need to make sure that the internal amenity in architecture internally is more important and significant than them signing the bottom of a building photo.
Yeah. We spoke about how 10 years ago buildings didn't have brands and how they've evolved. How have your projects evolved over the last decade? I mean, surely you look back on things you did 10 years ago and think, oh, like cringe, but...
No.
No? You don't?
No. I mean, you've just seen probably this stuff that we've built in the last 10 years. I'm really proud of the stuff we've done the last 10 years, and I probably look back 15, 20 years ago and maybe cringe a little.
Yep.
I'm more concerned with the amenity. If I'm cringing, it's about how we done the amenity. So, as an example, and I can be really frank, it's all my best friends in the room. This building was developed during the GFC. So
this one here?
Yep, that's Lily in South Yarra. We developed that during the GFC. I'm not as proud of that building as I am every other one because I think we were a bit aggressive on the apartment sizes because the price sensitivity became really critical during GFC. Funding was problematic, so I had to do a lot more one bedrooms. We kind of churned and burned that development out a little bit, and I got really upset with the quality, the amenity, not the the quality of the design, but the amenity of what we were giving our occupant. So I just felt like I couldn't do development if that was going to be an outcome. So this building is quite interesting, Avenue. It's actually the first building development we did on our own without capital investors and institutional investors. We did this off our own balance sheet, so we're really proud of it. It's a significant, if you go to the next screen, I think, it's a significant corner in Chapel Street, South Yarra. It's sort of the entrance into Chapel Street, South Yarra, where the Yarra is. And I really wanted to, I made Callum sit with me for days on end and really wanted to deliver far more than what had ever been delivered before. So, and incredibly, the templates that we came up with for these apartments set the templates now for all our development. So it hasn't changed, believe it or not, over the last, about 6 years ago. So our apartment modules are the same, and we build to modules. We call it a 3-4-3 module, which is 3 metres, 4 metres, 3 metres by 7s. And the one bedroom, you drop off a 3 metre bedroom. And so we build to our module. So there's no corridors. It's all glazing, amenity, really good amenity. So this is an incredible building. And I often look, because I think a building is as good as how many people are kind of selling it. I've never seen an apartment come up for sale in the 200 apartments in this building in the last 5 years. Maybe one or two. So I'm immensely proud of that one. It looks good. Should have been taller, but again, that's planning and council. And
It's never enough, is it?
well, it's always enough. You sound like my wife. It's always enough, but it should have been taller. Like just to have the beauty of the elongation of it.
Yeah.
It's a bit stumpy, but I'm still very proud of it. It's like all my children. There's no better one, but they're all different and great.
Now, I'm not following the script at all, so
I could tell, but I'm going.
I'm happy to just keep winging it.
Yeah.
What do you reckon is part of how you've been successful? What do you reckon sort of distinguishes you from a pack? Is it just the fact that you had a go and went hard after it, or do you think there's?
I think all developers have a go. To be a developer, you've got to have a go. To be a developer today, and there's more younger developers around today. You can see the Newcastle guys in the front row, the developers. To be a developer today, you've got to have a go. So I wouldn't like to say I'm any different. In actual fact, I think I'm probably lazier today than I was. I think what probably, I don't look at the others so much in the sense of distinguishing ourselves. We're committed to what we set out to do. We're committed to design. We will not do, we got a bit fed up in Melbourne about 5 years ago because the apartments were shrinking in size and becoming too small. And we felt we couldn't compete because we refused to go that small. When this was developed, the average size apartment there was about 77 square metres. And the average size in Melbourne was about 62 square metres. So we couldn't compete as a price point. So instead of trying to change the system, we actually packed up and left. So I packed up basically out of Melbourne. We still had some things going. And we opened the Sydney office 5 years ago. Because Step 65 and the planning allowed for really fair outcomes. And it took the end user into account, the end occupant, and it really considered how they would live. So back to your question, what sets us apart? I'm not sure, but our commitment to our end occupant and the design and the delivery. We have our own construction management in-house. We're not builders, but we manage, and people say, why don't you subcontract? Because we want what we want. They don't let me walk on site anymore either. Because they don't like variations and me changing things. But my guys are committed and we're committed to delivering, as we said before. And so I'm not sure that sets us apart because there are a lot of good developers now. And we've got room for great developers. But I think a good developer, their commitment to delivering on their promise and a quality project makes them better, to answer that question.
What's the most important, you probably just answered it, but the most important attribute in a developer?
Stupidity, naivety.
Brashness.
narcissistic tendencies. No, I'm lucky I've got them all. What's the important traits? I think we're all a bit alike. We are brash. You need to be. You need to be confident, and you need to believe in yourself. I think I went through schooling when I wasn't great at school and didn't have that many people believe in me, and this is when everyone goes, oh. But
No, no one did.
it's that wealthy, rich developer thing, that stigma. I think you've really got to be true to yourself and believe in yourself. So we become, people say I'm a bit like a bulldozer, because, I have rules in my house where my kids are not allowed to use the word can't. And we try and say they're not allowed to use the word no, but we don't take no for an answer.
Yeah.
To be successful, you just can't take no for an answer. So it's really interesting. One of our projects recently in Sydney that we delivered, I played with the render and the rendering company a lot, to a point where I loved what we did. A little bit different to the architect. The architect got a bit of a fright when I played with the building look, and I went to market with it. And then my guys were saying, we can't deliver what you've put in the render. And I said, I don't understand that. So
Which building?
It's actually Eve.
We got it here?
I think so. Yeah, this one. So this was our first building in Sydney. We like I said, we opened an office 5 years ago in Sydney, and it's been the best thing we've done, because Sydney market is for us. People appreciate our quality, our design. We own our space, where we're that kind of, we're not luxury developers, we're not crap developers. We sit in the middle where we're price sensitive, quality design apartments. So there's a little twist there at the entrance, and they kept saying, I said, go back, get the engineers, work it through. And I'm really proud of the guys, because we didn't just accept that we couldn't do it, and we've done it, and it looks great. So,
Paul, how is the world changing in your mind in terms of tech, in terms of social disruption, media, 24-hour news cycles? How's the world changing? How are you responding?
Remember, I'm a simple developer, so I can only talk to simple things. The world is changing, but I love, I don't know if anyone knows Ian Schrager.
Yeah.
I think Ian Schrager is probably the best developer that's ever been, ever.
So for everyone's reference, he's the guy that started Studio 54, who's now probably the best developer in the world. Does the most intelligent, smart, cool hotels.
His hotels
all
are
over
the
world.
best, his developments are the best, and you go on Ian's, and I've been fortunate enough last year to sit with him and talk to him. So you go on his website, it's really simple. There's not much to it. And he's often quoted as saying, it's amazing how everyone gets caught up with different things and IT and so on, but I've always found the simplest developments that have beauty in its design last forever. And I'm a big believer in that, and I think that's true. I think we get caught up with, the way you can have these systems where the lift comes up, and they're all little things, add-ons, but the core intrinsic value of development must be amenity, quality design, and delivering on its project. So I don't get caught up too much. I know people come and talk to us about new things, and I leave that with our construction managers. But I say the core aspect of getting a development right has its simple beauty, will last forever. Everything else comes and goes and becomes obsolete by the time. A development cycle is generally, on these high-rise projects, generally 3 to 5 years. So by the time you've actually looked at something that's a new gimmick or gadget, by the time we've delivered it into the building, it's obsolete. So I worry when people get too caught up on these things.
So what parts of the human psychology then do you tap into when
Desire.
you desire? Yep.
Yeah, we want an emotion of desire, a feeling of want, house proud, a real sense of belonging.
And where's the stickiness in desire?
Jeez, that's a whole different conversation. I think the stickiness is we go too far. We overcomplicate things. Sometimes we overthink things and we overcomplicate it. And I think it's about just being true to ourselves. And I can give you an example. I did development where I got caught up a little bit in the whole Asian influence and the Asian buyer, and I went and bought a site in a very heavily Asian influenced area. I couldn't truly deliver my core values. So I got caught up in um, buying a site because of the heat of the market, but it didn't suit me. And so I decided to sell the site because what I was designing was not being appreciated, and no one was kind of, they were looking at a Meriton apartment and then looking at our apartment, and they couldn't see the difference. And for me, I just felt that was wrong. That didn't feel right instinctively. So we can overthink things, and we can not be true to ourselves. So we're very clear. That was a great lesson, and it was only a couple of years ago. It was a great lesson to be really true to myself and not just grow and get bigger because, let's get a $2 billion pipeline because equity capital raising is cheaper at the moment and these sort of things. No, it's about doing only projects that suit our core value. So they're some of the sticky things.
Where do you look to for inspiration, whether it be in design or whether it be in business or personally, professionally? Who do you have a bunch of North Stars that you seek to?
I'm fortunate again. My wife's an incredible designer, and we both share that love of design and furniture design, and so we kind of push each other. Last year we went and spent 4 months in the US, living and just trying to take in different intrigas, the Editions hotels and those sort of things, and be inspired. But sometimes the little things will inspire me because, like, this kind of look and feel of this building was inspired by Jamie Hayon and one of his vases. I love the beautiful of the kind of the rose gold and the white on this vase, and I said, let's use that to use.
Do we have it here?
It'll be later on.
Later on. Yep. You worked really, really hard as a younger guy.
Yeah, I think at 21.
You're still working with the same intensity now as you did.
I say as we get older, we work smarter, not harder. No, I don't. Again, you had Gurner here yesterday. By the way, did you have more people sitting here for Gurner or for me? I just want to know.
Few more.
Wait, thanks so much. I told you guys can come to every talk I do. What was your question?
Do you work as hard now as you did?
Yeah, I was trying to avoid it.
10 years ago.
Someone like Tim is intense. He's full on, and he's life. I have the same life coach, and
You have a life coach.
yeah, you have a life coach to find your balance because
Is he or she the most impressive person you've ever met in your life?
he or she has an expiry date.
Okay.
I always think life coaches have an expiry date. If they haven't got you to a point and they haven't taught you what you need to find within a year or two, they're not good.
Yeah.
And so mine's actually expired. So I'm now teaching him. No, but he's got a point. He wants to be big, and he's really driven, and I love that and respect that. I don't have that anymore. Maybe I'm a bit older, but for me, it's now. I think wealth creation is very important in the start, and I say wealth preservation becomes a little bit more important later on. Now with children and so on, when you don't have kids and you're a developer, you can take on the world, and then all of a sudden you think about your children and other things. I think you just find a bit more balance naturally. So no, I definitely don't work as hard as I used to. Like I said, I've got a great team. They work hard. But I don't think we ever switch off as developers or people that own their own business. I've never, my wife makes rules when we're away about what hours I can look at my phone, on holidays in the morning and in the evening for my emails and so on. So it's about finding that balance. And I feel like when my kids were a little bit younger, I just wasn't around enough. And opening in Sydney the last 5 years and working 2 or 3 days every week in Sydney to get it going, I kind of, I was a bit absent. So this year I've really pulled back.
So what's next? What's next for you?
What's next for me? Retirement. Um, Look, yeah,
Legit?
no,
Legitimately?
no, I
No,
could
no.
never stop. No, I love it too much.
Paul Fridman retires.
Yeah, no,
Breaking news.
no.
What's the next part of your
Look,
journey,
I'm
mate?
now changing the structure a bit. So I'm restructuring Fridcorp into kind of 3 different type categories or brands. We've got Fridcorp, and one of my development directors is going to kind of head that up, and I'll still be involved, but just not as intensely involved as I have been. Then there'll be like Fridcorp Studio, which is kind of our sub. I really love up and coming architects and designers. And I just feel like we don't give them a good enough or a big enough platform,
Yeah.
because we say they don't understand planning, or they haven't done this before, and they don't understand building efficiencies. So a big goal for me is to work with up and coming designers. So I've set up kind of this structure where it'll be what I call the circa 50 unit developments, and the mandate is to only work with up and coming designers, architects, artists, and kind of the younger guys in my office will take that and run with it. And I think I've gone through 6-12 months of lacking a little bit of desire for what I'm doing. So I'm now going to have work through a very high-end brand where I work with the best that I can get, the best designers that I can get, my Herzog de Moren, and I really want to try and bring them out. And that's not to say we don't have great architects, we do, but I've got these dreams and goals, and I want to do some really, really high-end stuff, mainly in Sydney.
And do you think the Australian market has the appetite to really
No, I don't
embrace?
care.
Not yet?
I don't care. No, there are going to be
don't care?
small enough projects that will self-fund it and will hold it. I think there is a market, but I don't think it's truly being tested.
Yeah.
Occasionally you'll get 3 or 4 units somewhere that...
Can you do a Herzog and de Muren in the middle market? Or does it have to be at the
I think it has to be the high end, because
Has to
the
be at the
problem with
top.
the middle market is it's generally bigger,
Yeah.
and we're very internal rate of return driven. So quickness to market and efficiencies, it kind of doesn't allow for that as much. So we've spoken to every one of them over the last 3 years about working with them all. Marcel Wonders, and I went and flew over and had meetings with him, and we're just not quick enough to get them involved, to get it to market. We just don't have the time frames generally, and they don't understand our planning. And so the time and the costs and the issues, you get killed in those middle market.
Yeah.
So for me, it's about, I really want to deliver on working with these people. Just my own sanity more than anything else.
Now, I played a game with Tim yesterday,
Really.
which is called Short and Long. And you can only answer short, which is a negative, or long, which is a positive. I'll run through a couple of different things.
Confused already, but we'll try it.
So if you think something's positive or has a positive outlook, you say long. And if you think something's got a negative outlook, you say short. Right? You can only choose those two. So the Brisbane apartment market over the next 3 years.
Oh, that's not fair to ask that question.
We'll move on.
While I'm sitting in Brisbane. I think the Brisbane market is short.
The Sydney apartment market over the next 3 years.
Yeah, long.
Long. The Melbourne apartment market over the next 3 years.
Short.
Short. Even for your stuff?
Yeah, well, we're not doing too much in Melbourne. We've got half a dozen sub 100 units, but we've got a big office tower in South Yarra coming. We're moving to more office than resi.
The Australian economy over the next 3 years?
I don't have a crystal ball.
The impact of blockchain on the property sector?
You told me you were going to ask this, and I must tell you, I must be really naive because I hadn't heard of it.
It's the next internet.
Yeah. So I had to Google it. Thank God for Google. And I looked at it and I went, shit, I still don't understand it.
Everyone should be understanding it.
Yeah,
It's big.
I understand it'll be the kind of the registry. I don't know. I'm actually not versed enough to comment on it, to be frank.
The Chinese buyer?
The Chinese buyer, well, they've propped this whole economy up for the last 5 years plus. I think it's going to be, they're going to be less available to us. I think the restrictions and what I think of stupid governance to really destroy their own market by doubling their stamp duty and these sort of things, I think is just stupidity. So I think the Chinese buyer will drop by at least 50%.
Fridcorp, the business?
Yeah, I would go long there.
You hesitated a little bit there.
Well, I was trying to work out if I'm involved in it or not.
Mate, thank you. We appreciate the candid kind of sharing of your journey to date. We wish you all the very, very best. We're very grateful for you taking the time to be here today. Would you please thank Paul Fridman?
Thank you.